News channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently. Don't
miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country and indeed around the world. We've plenty coming up today. Public spending, productivity, and how to save money this summer, while there is also a cabinet split between number 10 and number 11 over cutting taxes. We have it all and more besides. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. Just after 12, here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Several new allegations of inappropriate behaviour have been made against former Conservative MP Chris Pincher. 6 claims have emerged just days after he resigned as Deputy Whip and was suspended from the party after allegedly groping 2 men. The latest allegations, which stretch back more than a decade, were reported in several newspapers this morning. They claim he made unwanted advances to male MPs. No official complaints were ever made, and he's denied the allegations to the newspapers. Mr Pincher says he's currently seeking professional medical support, but insists he will remain as an MP. The government wants security checks on new airport workers to be treated as a priority to prevent travel delays this summer. The Department of Transport claim counter-terrorist checks are being processed in record times as shortages of baggage and security staff fuel hold-ups. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says people have made huge sacrifices during the pandemic and deserve their flights to run on time. Travel expert Simon Calder told GB News there are still serious delays.
And there's a huge blame game going on with the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps saying to the airlines, you've spent 2 years saying all you want to do is fly people around and to the airports as well. You just want people to be able to travel as soon as they can. It all falls apart. But they say, look, actually, we suffered the most serious travel restrictions of any European country.
The British Medical Association is criticising government plans to stop sick pay for NHS workers who test positive for COVID. The decision, which comes into effect on July 7th, means staff can no longer take special leave to self-isolate. The BMA is warning the move will mean many will be working despite being symptomatic with the virus. The Department of Health and Social Care says NHS staff have generous support with up to 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay, depending on their length of service. The government is spending watchdog plans to investigate the Prime Minister's 2019 election pledge to build 40 new hospitals by the end of the decade. It's after the Shadow Health Secretary warned the plans are a waste of taxpayers' money, with many hospitals having alterations or refurbishments instead of being new. Wes Streeting has also criticised delays, with NHS trusts still waiting for funds to be allocated. Russia says at least 3 people have been killed and 4 injured in the Russian city of Belgorod near the Ukraine border. The area's regional governor says at least 11 apartment buildings and 39 homes were damaged, with 5 destroyed. However, the reports are yet to be independently verified. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Russia's attack continues to focus on the Donbas region.
There is a sense of relaxation in many rear cities now, but the war is not over. It is there. Unfortunately, its brutality sometimes only grows, and we must not forget about it. Brutal hostilities continue along the entire front line. In Donbas, the epicenter, of course, in the cities of Luhansk region. Hostile activity is intensifying in the Kharkiv region.
Thousands of Australians have been ordered to evacuate parts of Sydney after torrential rain brought intense flooding. Vehicles have been left marooned and sports fields turned into lakes, with the Met Office warning the downpour will intensify over the next 2 days. Steph Cook, Minister for Emergency Services and Resilience, is warning the public not to be complacent.
The Hawkesbury and Nepean rivers will rise higher than what we experienced in March 2021, March 2022 and April of 2022. If you were safe in 2021, do not assume you will be safe tonight. This is a rapidly evolving situation, and we could very well see areas impacted that have never experienced flooding before.
And back home, Wimbledon will have tennis on the middle Sunday of the tournament for the first time in its history. British players Heather Watson and Cameron Norrie will both be in action, making their debuts in the last 16. The centenary of Centre Court is also being celebrated at the All England Club, with previous winners making an appearance alongside refugees from Ukraine, Syria and Afghanistan. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. I want to focus today on what the polls tell me is your overriding concern, the economy and specifically the cost of living crisis. According to YouGov, who track these things month on month, week on week, nearly twice as many of you put that as top of your troubles, well ahead of health, which has seen a welcome and steady decline as a thing most people are worried about. But what is to be done about that cost of living crisis? The help on energy bills announced in the spring budget won't kick in until October, when the autumn budget is also due. That's more than 3 months away. Meanwhile, inflation continues to rise, and even before that, £15 billion package kicks in, and whatever else the Chancellor can conjure up in that main autumn budget, public borrowing continues to rise, and the cost of it, as interest rates also rise. Now, there's said to be a lively debate between number 10 and number 11 Downing Street, the Prime Minister and his Chancellor, on cutting VAT. Boris Johnson wants it, it would appear, but Rishi Sunak is said to be more cautious. Now, here's the really interesting thing. They've jointly written this 2-page article in the Sun newspaper today, pledging to do all that they can to help us through the cost of living crisis. But curiously, it is mainly a list of what they've already done. And the biggest point to what might happen in autumn is more help for businesses. Now, many will welcome that, but on his own side, there's growing pressure for more immediate help for us, the individuals. In the Sunday Express, Damien Green, Craig McKinley and Sir John Redwood urge a cut in VAT now, especially on energy bills. But bear this in mind. A cut in VAT would add to borrowing unless it's matched with cuts in other areas of public spending. And many economists argue it would further fuel inflation. It's a vicious cycle. But others say it could boost demand, giving us more to spend, and that would stimulate the economy, and that is a good thing. Well, one of them is Sir John Redwood, and I'm delighted to say that I'll be talking to him at the end of this programme. Now, many companies also, not least in the retail sector, have been saying how worried they are that the UK is sliding toward a recession if we're not already in one. So it's a finely balanced argument that we will have today. We really want to hear what you think as well. Would you cut VAT right now? Would you cut those green levies right now? Would you cut income tax? Not at the end of this Parliament, as Rishi Sunak's promised, but right now. Would you accept cuts elsewhere in public spending to help keep borrowing down? And have you got any other ideas? Email them at gbviews@gbnews.uk with any comments that you may have on our stories and on our conversations that we're covering today. We're also on Twitter and on Facebook. Do get in touch. So, first up, to get that conversation underway, live here in the studio with me is a good friend of mine, Nigel Nelson. He's the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People and has been around almost as long as I have. First and foremost, we were chatting before we came in. Were you as surprised as I was that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer jointly take 2 pages of the most widely read national newspaper and basically say, this is what we did back in the spring, and if you're lucky, come the autumn, we might cut business tax?
Yes, I was a bit. I mean, Boris Johnson's a former journalist. He knows that what you have to do in a newspaper is tell a story, and that has to be news. And no, you're absolutely right. The trouble about what he said in The Sun today is that it's not news. We've known about the various things that are happening. They seem to want to crow about what they've given without telling us what they're about to do next.
Yeah. I mean, the other weird thing about it, and 1 or 2 people have commented upon it on social media already this morning, is that that penny does not appear to have dropped. For example, the changes to national insurance, everybody's unhappy about the rise in 1.25%, but the amount that you and I and everybody out there can earn before we start paying national insurance is going up. But that hasn't got out to people.
No, and I think that's probably one of the reasons for the piece they were doing, to try and get that sorted out. And we've got 2 things coming up this week which the government think are flagship policies. One is the national insurance rise in the threshold, which will save up to about £300 a year. The other one will be childcare costs. They plan to bring childcare costs down by easing the regulations around childminding. So those are their kind of big policies. The bit that worries me is that it's really sort of skimming along the surface.
Yes.
We're not really getting to the actual nub of what you need to do about the cost of living.
If when you go home this afternoon before watching the tennis or the Grand Prix or whatever you do of your Sunday afternoon and the phone rang and it was either Rishi or Boris saying, Nigel, we need some help. What are your ideas? You're an experienced journalist, been there, done it. What would you do?
Number one, raise wages. I mean, I think that the idea the government are trying to keep wage rises down to 2 and 3% when we're talking about inflation hitting 11% by the end of the year is just not sustainable. That the strikes don't help anything, but I do understand why people are going on strike. That during the pandemic, they carried on working and they were more or less, they weren't quite promised that they would get a decent pay deal at the end of it, but it was certainly hinted at. And now the government want to keep these down. I just don't think that's realistic. We should.
But if you say that, I mean, he also points that they point out in this article that they've done quite a lot on the minimum wage, which companies have to pay now for their lowest paid workers. If they start raising the wages of nurses, of teachers, of people in the public sector, again, I repeat my point from the introduction. Unless it's matched by productivity, which is tricky in the public sector, it's either more borrowing or it's more inflation.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the whole problem of inflation, when I was studying A-level economics, it was too much money chasing too few goods. So the way you tackle it is to take money out of the economy, or you get productivity up and you produce more goods to get prices down. So yes, it's inflationary, but it doesn't have to be very inflationary. Bear in mind, pensioners have got a 10% rise coming up. Now, they deserve it, but that is an inflationary policy. I would like to see sort of wages kept around about 5%, not the 2 and 3%, not the 11% that it's going up to. Let's go down the middle, so both sides are bearing the brunt of it.
Yeah.
And of course, Rishi Sunak, if wages go up, he gets more revenue because he gets a better tax take.
Yeah. You and I have both covered over the years many moments of real tension between number 10 and number 11. We both remember Margaret Thatcher versus Nigel Lawson very well, which ended in tears for Nigel. Ultimately, it ended in tears for Margaret Thatcher, you could argue, but that happened as well. The TBGBs, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, also real pitched, bloody battles as well. But in both cases, Thatcher won through and Blair won through because they had the political calibre and capital to do it. Do you believe, as an observer of these matters, that Johnson is so damaged now, whether it's Partygate, whether it's Chris Pincher or any of the other things that we've all reported on, it just leaves him so damaged that actually he can't now read the Riot Act, either to his backbenchers or to his Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Certainly not to the backbenchers, I agree. I think it's a slightly different relationship with the Chancellor. He's also damaged. I mean, the various revelations about his wife's wealth...
The non-dom status, the green card stuff,
all that. That now, where he was being talked about as Boris Johnson's successor, you don't hear that much about the House of Commons at the moment. So Rishi has lost a lot of political capital as well. So at the moment, it's going to be the battle, I think, between, a bit lower down, it's the officials working there where the Treasury don't want to see tax cuts. Number 10 certainly do. And the question of who will win, at the moment, as I say, that it's not quite Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, or Margaret Thatcher, Nigel Nelson. This is a bit more evenly matched because they've both lost credibility.
And the final point is this, that economics is politics and politics is economics, and ultimately people will vote with their pocketbook, as they call it. James Carville, famously in the United States of America, advisor to Bill Clinton, quotes, "It's the economy, stupid." If they don't get this right, even if there's an election 18 months, 2 years down the road, they're going to hurt.
Yeah,
they're going to hurt bad.
At the moment, I mean, Tory MPs are incredibly depressed. They don't see how they can win a seat. I mean, especially with Tiverton, you're talking about 390 seats that have majorities less than that. And Tory MPs genuinely feel that they are about to lose an election. That's why they're so terrified when Boris put it around. There might be a snap election in October.
Yeah. Fascinating. I'd like you to hang on because we've got another couple of guests coming up. I want to hear what you think of their contributions as well. But for the time being, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much indeed. Nigel Nelson there, the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. And as I say, he will be back later in the show to give his views in a moment, but also just after the 1 o'clock junction. Delighted now to be joined by Darwin Friend, another friend of mine, policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance. Were you able to hear what Nigel was saying?
I was, thank you, and thank you very much for having me on the show, Alistair.
Good to see you. Straight to one of his top points, he said what he would do right now, whether it was the private sector via minimum wage and stuff like that, or the public sector, teachers, nurses, the rest of it, is raise wages so that we are all spending more. That will help with the cost of living crisis. That will help the economy. Do you go along with that?
Well, my concern with that is what the impact of that is going to be on inflation. Of course, when we talk about public sector wage increases, the government's got to pay for that somehow. And that's going to ultimately have to be right now through higher borrowing. And when we're already spending well over £1 trillion in spending, and that's meant to go up over the next 5 years, I'm concerned that if we spend even more on increasing wages, that's going to make that even worse. And what we need to remember is higher borrowing, higher spending by the government needs to be paid for somehow. And when we've already got debt at almost 100% of GDP, and debt interest is meant to be almost £83 billion this year alone, then I am concerned that if we continue pushing up wages, it's only going to make our fiscal problems even worse.
But if you take me down your road, and Sir John Redwood, I'm sure, will take me down that road as well at the end of the programme, and say, therefore, the answer is actually to cut taxes so that we retain more of what we earn rather than seeing inflationary wage rises. If you cut taxes, that has to be paid for either through productivity or through more borrowing. So exactly what you've just said about the dangers of higher wages also applies to lower taxes.
Well, there is that risk, but we have actually looked into this, and the impact of cutting taxes is actually less than the inflationary impact is less than that of borrowing more money. And I think what we need to do in this debate and in this economy as a whole is think actually long term rather than short term fixes of just spending more money. And when we look at tax cuts, I mean, we were talking about businesses earlier, I believe. The corporation tax cut during the Cameron government, that was cut, and then revenues ended up going up as a result of that. So rather than always thinking, oh, a tax is being cut, that's going to cost us money, and that money is then always lost. In fact, what happens is if income tax was cut right now, it would mean more money in people's pocket, which they could then spend, and that would end up circulating back through the economy and into the Treasury through higher revenues.
What do you think is the inside track on this number 10, number 11 row over VAT, but perhaps the whole package? As I said to Nigel, they've taken to the Sun newspaper, and I'm sure you've read it already, saying this is all the good stuff that Rishi did back in the spring that will kick in October, but they cannot make their minds up on cutting VAT, even cutting VAT on energy bills. What's going on in Downing Street?
Well, I think what we need to do is not be looking back to the past anymore. What they've done, some of it has been welcome, such as the national insurance threshold increase, which is kicking in this week. But we now need to be looking to the future and how we can support taxpayers and businesses moving forward. And so a VAT cut is something that I would very much welcome. Cutting it down to 17.5% would mean more investment in the economy, which would then boost productivity, because it would mean there's more capital available per worker, making us a more productive economy. And so I would welcome that, but I would also say that we do need a business-friendly environment, because that's going to increase wages, because companies are going to have more money to then spend to increase wages and invest in their workers. And so I think them increasing national insurance on employers as well as employees, the corporation tax cut being reversed, and also a VAT cut would all help with that situation.
Finally, you got the British Chambers of Commerce in today's paper saying they're genuinely fearful of a recession, and the retail sector said it midweek. Are you as well?
It is concerning at the minute. As I mentioned at the head of my conversation with you, the physical alarms are starting to ring, I think. And so I think now is the time for the government really to be bold when it comes to supporting taxpayers and businesses. And I think that should be done by cutting VAT, increasing the NI threshold, and also bringing forward and doubling that income tax cut so people have more money in their pockets, growth is rising, and there's more investment in the economy.
Darwin Friend, thank you very much indeed. Taxpayers Alliance, good to see you again. Always good to see you. My final guest and friend is Julian Jessup in this part of the conversation. Julian's an independent economist, but perhaps slightly more importantly in this context is also a former Treasury man. So we've heard from Nigel and we just heard there from Darwin. Boost wages, cut tax. That will mean the economy does better and the political outlook for the Prime Minister and his friends will look better. What are the blocking points to that strategy within the Treasury? Why is Rishi and his team saying, we need to be more cautious?
Well, first of all, I've got some sympathy, actually, for my former colleagues at the Treasury for two reasons. First of all, it's not as if the Treasury has done nothing during this crisis. And I think that's part, obviously, of the context of the article that number 10 and number 11 published today. So the government has done a lot in terms of cost of living support and tax cuts, probably far more than it was intending or expecting to do. The other point is that I think some people sort of often regard tax cuts as the solution to any problem, in the same way that maybe people on the left think that increased government spending is the solution to any problem. So, rightly or wrongly, the Treasury feels it needs to be the adult in the room and say, hang on a minute, is this necessarily the best solution to the problems that we're currently facing? That said, I do think it is absolutely right to be thinking about cutting taxes further over the next few months. A cut in VAT actually wouldn't necessarily be top of my list. I think VAT is actually one of the least bad taxes, and cutting VAT is expensive and not particularly well targeted. But I would probably include it as part of a package of measures that would also include delaying or cancelling the planned increases in corporation tax, doing something about the way that more people are now paying higher rates of income tax as well, so unfreezing the personal allowances, and definitely doing more specifically on fuel prices. So I'm not convinced about the need to cut VAT overall, but definitely take it off fuel.
Sure. I'd just like to explain that penultimate point you made there. The threshold is the amount of money that we can all earn before we pay any tax, and then the amount we can earn before we start paying the higher rates of tax. And I'm 100% with you. I mentioned the fact that you're an independent economics observer and commentator, but again, just one final foot back into number 10 and number 11. These guys are both facing the echo of some of their problems, whether it's Rishi and his wife's non-dom status and the green card in America, Boris Johnson, whether it's Partygate or now Chris Pincher and the rest of it. Are they caught between a rock and a hard place that says they both know what they should be doing economically, but at the same time they're desperate to rebuild their standing in the eyes of the electorate, and they just seem to be getting both wrong?
Well, it is very difficult. In a sense, they're coming from different positions. Obviously, Boris Johnson's absolute priority is to be popular and to be re-elected. And often that sort of focus makes you want to think about short-term decisions, whatever might be popular, not necessarily what is right. At the other extreme, the Treasury, of course, is the guardian of the public finances. It always feels it needs to push back against any proposal for increases in public spending or cuts in tax. But I think there has to be a middle ground, which is that every single proposal, whether it's a tax cut or a spending increase, is judged on its own merits. And here, as I say, the Treasury has been willing to consider tax cuts that are reasonably well targeted. And I think if people do make decent proposals for tax cuts in the autumn, the Treasury will listen.
Yeah. And finally, do you think that will happen?
I think it inevitably has to. Although the government has done a lot, we do know that there are further pressures in the pipeline. A very difficult winter for lots of people, with food bills so high, energy prices likely to rise further. I think the government inevitably has to do more. The debate is about exactly which levers it pulls. I think it would prefer to do it through business taxes, but I think inevitably there'll be more pressure to do it on personal taxes as well.
Great stuff. Always a pleasure to have you on board, Julian Jessup. Thank you very much indeed. You stay in touch. Julian Jessup, their former Treasury man and independent economist. Always worth listening to and always worth reading as well. And certainly listening to, as I said a few moments ago.
Thank you.
Cheers for now, Julian, is Nigel Nelson. If you put the two of them together, both Darwin Friend from the Taxpayers Alliance and Julian Jessup, their former Treasury man, I came away from both of those conversations that the head of steam for personal tax cuts is real, and Jessup saying he reckons they will be able to pull it off by October.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I took from those two interviews as well. I mean, bear in mind, rather like the unions exist to improve workers' paying conditions, the Taxpayers Alliance exists to reduce taxes. So that kind of is their only line when it comes down to how to improve things. The idea of reducing personal taxes in October, I hope it happens.
Yes.
But I just feel that in the present climate, when we will be looking by October at inflation of 11%, that seems to be unlikely.
Yep. The final point that I took very much from Julian, and it was one I genuinely hadn't thought of, although I do know it now, I reflect upon it, is that it isn't only that point that you and I were saying about Rishi having gone through tough times recently, and the Prime Minister as well, that the Treasury officials who draw up the sums, do the charts, put forward the policy proposals, are riding high at the moment because their hands are clean. They've done as good a job they could throughout the lockdown and COVID and furlough and what have you. It's the officials who are calling the shots right now until these two giants of British politics recover.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And if you're a Treasury official, what you want to do, as Julian just said, is you want to keep a tight handle on the purse strings. You don't like giving money away. That's what happens in the Treasury.
Brilliant. Nigel, and I've asked you to hang around, go and have a coffee and stretch your legs, and then come back at 1 o'clock as well and join in the conversation then, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you.
For the time being, thank you very much indeed. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and what a group of cracking friends we've had so far. And we've lots more still to come, including it is the highlight of the season for many. F1 fans today have flocked the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Sold out days, if not weeks ago. And I have a very special guest coming up, so do please stay tuned. But first, the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will see a mix of sunshine and showers, heaviest and most frequent in the east. Let's take a look at the details. There'll be increasing amounts of blue sky across southwest England this afternoon. A few lingering showers, but most places staying dry, highs reaching around 20 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. A few of the showers could be on the heavy side as well. Plenty of sunny spells across Wales this afternoon. There'll be a few showers, but not as heavy compared to recent days. Highs of around 20 Celsius. Showers continue to fade away across northwest England this afternoon. There'll be increasing amounts of sunshine as a result, feeling pleasant for all with light winds and highs of 18 Celsius. North East England will remain fairly unsettled with a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some could be heavy at times, highs of 19 Celsius with light winds for all. Sunny spells and scattered showers across much of Scotland this afternoon. Some of the showers may be heavy, but many places will avoid these. Temperatures reaching around 18 Celsius. Largely dry across Northern Ireland. A few showers are possible, most likely in the east. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs reaching 18 Celsius, breezy along some northern coasts. So showers will fade away for many as we move through to the evening, staying breezy and unsettled though across northern Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome back. It's just slipped past 12:30 on this lovely Sunday afternoon, and you're watching GB News, TV and radio with me, Alastair Stewart and friends. Now, yesterday we did a lot of the programme about Ukraine, but because we had so many utterly brilliant guests, we ran out of time to give a big chunk of emails that you'd sent in and tweets, which I promised I would do. So I also promised at the end of yesterday that we would pick out some of the best ones, and here they are. Steve says, the war in Ukraine shows the importance of unity and being a partner. The rise of charities, which can do much good, highlights the need for stronger governance. War creates shortages and alliances. The skill and competence of a government is to manage all three components effectively. Brilliant point, Steve, and I think that may have been slightly prompted by my conversation with the vet from Dodson and Horrell as well, about how good people do good stuff. Paul joined the conversation, say brilliant analysis as always. Well, thank you for that, Paul. But, here it comes, we should be under no illusion there can only be one outcome from this unprovoked Kremlin aggression, and that is their defeat, i.e. the defeat of Russia. Well, I think we covered that, and we're pretty clear on what we thought about appeasement. Fred joins in and says the Royal Air Force needs more F-35s and anti-submarine aircraft. The Navy needs more aircraft to protect its carriers, and the Army needs replacement troop carriers. Why don't we just build up our forces? It's no-brainer. The Putin wolf will be at the West's door for many years indeed. Well, Johnson has pledged to increase defence spending quite significantly by the end of this decade. And Ben Wallace says that he would like a little bit more if that's possible. So there we are, top of the hit parade there. I also began today saying, let's hear what you think about the cost of living crisis. And you've been on fire already. We're only 32 minutes into the programme. Valentina says, if people use the online salary calculator, they'll find that there isn't a crisis in the UK and no need to cut taxes. prices. We are better off in the UK to wear the brunt of fuel prices. Just look at what's happening in the rest of Europe for comparisons. That's from Valentina. Here's another. Nigel says Rishi Sunak clearly needs to move some of the green taxes from the energy bills onto suppliers. Governments can still have the same tax revenue. Cutting VAT on energy bills to 1 or 2% also makes sense when prices are due to go up again in October. The revenue will still be similar. I'm not sure about that, but I get the point that you're making. Steve joins the conversation and says, if there's a cost of living crisis, why are there so many people attending the likes of Glastonbury, the British Grand Prix, or whinging about the airports? That is harsh, Steve, but it is a point that has been observed by many. Do please keep your views coming in, and also do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're at GB News, and you can hear all of the interviews and conversations either about Ukraine yesterday or what we've done on the cost of living today. Lots of good stuff there for you. And you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, TV and radio. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including the British Grand Prix starts in T-minus 3 hours. And it's looking like a good day for our home boys. Lewis Hamilton will start in 5th, Lando Norris will start in 6th. We have a special guest coming on the programme to talk about it all next, and you really won't want to miss it. But let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 12:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Several new allegations of inappropriate behaviour have been made against former Conservative MP Chris Pincher. 6 claims have emerged just days after he resigned as Deputy Whip and was suspended from the party after allegedly groping 2 men. The latest allegations, which stretch back more than a decade, were reported in several newspapers this morning, claiming he made unwanted advances to male MPs. No official complaints were ever made, and he's denied the allegations to newspapers. The British Medical Association is criticising government plans to halt sick pay for NHS workers who test positive for COVID. The decision, which comes into effect on July 7th, means staff can no longer take special leave to self-isolate. The Department of Health and Social Care says NHS staff have generous support with up to 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay, depending on length of service. The government wants security checks on new airport workers to be treated as a priority to prevent travel delays this summer. The Department of Transport claim counter-terrorist checks are being processed in record times as shortages of baggage and security staff fuel hold-ups. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps saying people have made huge sacrifices during the pandemic and deserve their flights to run on time. And Wimbledon will have tennis on the middle Sunday of the tournament for the first time in its history. British players Heather Watson and Cameron Norrie both in action, making their debuts in the last 16. The centenary of Centre Court is also being celebrated at the All England Club, with previous winners making an appearance. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now back to Alastair Stewart and friends. Just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back, 22 minutes to 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. My next guest began his career working for the Bank of Ireland, so probably has quite a keen interest in our main topic today, the cost of living crisis, public spending and all the rest of it. But that is not what I want to talk to him about. On this, the day of the British Grand Prix, he is my perfect guest. He drove a bit himself, karts, when he was a youngster. He owned a team which did pretty well and has become one of the most authoritative voices in Formula One. I am delighted, on what is a very busy day for him, that Eddie Jordan has taken a pit stop to chat to us from the Channel 4 production office, and Channel 4 are covering the race live. Eddie, it genuinely is a real pleasure to see you. Thanks for finding time for us. The British Grand Prix, one of the biggest events on the sporting calendar, 500,000 people and sold out way back. What's the buzz like?
Well, it's just remarkable, the turnaround in some respects, because I think Britain wasn't sure where Formula One was going to, but this sort of resurgence, as you rightly say, over 400,000 people over 3 days, it's remarkable. The only thing on the downside is that traffic is appalling, but that's just a tiny consequence of the great joy. It's sunny here today. Yesterday was cold, and we're going to get a dry race. So are we going to get a British winner? I'm not so sure, but nevertheless, I know that we've got 3 great young boys coming here, and each of them could have a chance. But my guess is that Lewis Hamilton is on the way back.
Ah, magic music to my ears, because I had noticed as well when I watched a bit of the qualification yesterday, but 5 Brits in the top 10, with those brilliant youngsters like Lando Norris and George Russell. But Lewis Absolutely. In number 5, middle of the pack. But goodness me, what an improvement from the start of the season.
Well, I think the problem is that I think Lewis had made such a great car out of what he had in the last number of years. And of course, the rules changed. All things changed in terms of suspension, aerodynamics, and it's kind of cut the team out a little bit. But, you know, George Russell has proved everybody wrong. What he has done, and to outqualify Lewis at this stage, has been remarkable. However, since the last race in Canada, Lewis finishing on the podium, I've seen a little bit of a spring in his step. I think there's a bit more about Lewis, and he wants to fight for this championship before it becomes too late. And of course, Max is running away with it, so he really needs to change things here.
Yeah, fascinating. And as I say, we've talked about it before. You know, I'm a big fan of Lewis, both when he was at McLaren and now that he's at Mercedes. And I think there was a really interesting indication of the character and quality of the man when the British crowd took against Max Verstappen. There was a bit of booing, and it was Lewis himself who came out and said, no, that's not on, that's not how we Brits do it. Let's move on and let's race the race.
But he's right, isn't it? Because whether you like it or not, you look at whatever sporting event, whether it's Wimbledon, whether it's the Open Championship in golf, whether it's motor racing, there is a feeling amongst the competitors, you know, forget the politics. Let's try and do what we do best, which is sportsmanship. And let's be very clear about what Lewis has done, not just for himself, but his family, what motor racing in Britain, everywhere throughout the world. He is revered. He is a 7 times world champion, and his voice has to be and must be heard. And I think he was absolutely right to say, this is not a question of booing here. This is a matter of fact. He is our world champion. Let's respect him for that. Irrespective of how that happened, he is the world champion. Let's respect him.
Yeah. On the Nelson Piquet comment and his inappropriate offensive language, the use of the N-word, whether it was in Portuguese or English, but that's what Piquet said, Lewis seemed less forgiving about that. There was real outrage on his part, and also, to be fair, Eddie, real outrage on the part of pretty well everybody in the sport.
Beyond doubt, that is 100%. supportive of Lewis. What Lewis has done from his family, I actually went to do a piece. I did a Top Gear event in Grenada for him, and the adoration that he has there and every other place throughout the world. For Nelson Piquet, who I knew well and drove with him and against him in the junior categories in Formula 1, it's a shocking thing for him to say. There was no need for him to say such a thing, no matter what he felt about it. And his apology, I'm sorry, just doesn't stand up. And I think Lewis has taken this to heart, because here's a guy who has been embraced by the sport. He was a great champion, but nevertheless, this is grossly unacceptable in any walk of life by any personality, irrespective of who it is.
Just quickly on the point of judgment, and I've got one or two other genuinely sporting questions to ask you, but what on earth was Eccleston up to, going on television and saying he's still a supporter of Putin, he'd take a bullet for him?
That's just, unfortunately, I'm quite certain Bernie didn't quite either understand what he was saying, or he was asked in a different... I'm not trying to defend him, because it's undefensible. You cannot defend a reply like that. Bernie, who I am a big supporter of, I was shocked. I was horrified, and I was so disappointed, because when you see, if you see the pain and the conflict that's going on with people, their own people in Russia, and also what's happening in Ukraine, it was an unbelievable thing for Bernie to say, and it's inexcusable. I don't know how you even come back from there, and I'm sure Bernie is so upset about what he said, because I'm sure he didn't mean to say it in the way it was said. Nevertheless, he is accountable for his own actions, and he knows this was said, and it's unacceptable and hugely wrong for him in the position that he was in.
Well, if you see him, tell him he's welcome on this programme to try and explain it and put it in context, because
I think he should do that, because
I do
but
too.
I'm not sure you can explain. I'm not sure you can explain it, because it's so bad.
All right, final two questions, Eddie, because I know you've got to dash off because you're covering the Grand Prix live and you've got tons to do. When you were team owner, and also when you were just around the circuits, you have had some of the absolute greats driving from you. Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna taken from us far too soon. Lovely Nigel Mansell, who I saw on telly the other day, and my great friend Damon Hill, who himself was a world champion. You said earlier on that Lewis was a great. Is he, as we jokingly say, GOAT, the greatest of all time so far?
Well, you know, he's still driving. We have to wait to see. For me, he's better than Michael Schumacher, because I don't think he played as many politics. Michael was always interfering with the team as to whether he could pass that guy, and that was contractually an obligation as far as Michael. And I think he damaged his reputation by doing that. The other greats, the greats like Alain Prost, the great like Senna, and other great champions, and a couple of local ones. We got James Hunt, and we got Jenson Button, we got Damon Hill, as you rightly say, and what an amazing man that person has turned out to be. Damon Hill has been sensational. We did a gig last night to the fans, and there was thousands of people turned up, and Damon came on stage, he played his guitar with me, I asked him to do it, and the people went absolutely berserk, because he is such a man of the people. But anyway, answer the question, I think there's a little bit of time. Is he the greatest of all time, Lewis? If he was to win the 8th title, beyond any doubt, if he can come back from this particular stage with his age and everything else, there's a lot of young talent all pushing for that top place on the podium. You know, it'll be a big ask, and if he's able to come back from that, absolutely he'll be the best.
I couldn't agree with you more. And also, just in passing, Damon Hill, what a hell of a dad as well. Great, terrific, brilliant family man. Final question, and really seriously cheeky, another shared passion. Are you going to get down to London after the Grand Prix in time to see the Stones at Hyde Park, or were you there last weekend?
I wasn't, which is a pity, and of course, Charlie Watts, being a drummer, I thought Charlie Watts made people talk about Keith Richards and Jagger and stuff like that, and of course Ronnie Wood, who I've had the pleasure of playing with some years ago. But we sadly miss, for me, Charlie Watts was such an inspiration for that band. And of course, some of our friends, as you rightly say, are dying. But tomorrow is an important day because it's Frank Williams Memorial. And I'm going to do that because Frank, even though there were times I hated him, but there were times I loved him. because he was a great man for Britain. He waved the flag, as we all know, and Sir Frank, the memorial is tomorrow, and it's in keeping with everyone here in the paddock is going to try to be there. So it's a big day, and we wish the Williams family every success tomorrow.
We'll get you to one of the European gigs. I've got Berlin penciled in my diary to try and pop over there and see the boys again.
I'm with you.
We'll see you there.
We'll
share the play. The best to the Williams family, particularly his lovely daughter. I totally agree with everything you said. One of the great guys. I had the pleasure of interviewing him years ago, and he really is a total British gent. Eddie, it's been a total joy. I floated the idea. We weren't sure. Channel 4 were kind to find time for you. You were kind to find time for us. Enormously grateful. Always a pleasure to see you, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much indeed.
From the bowels of Channel 4, its production office, we say thank you for having us on the show. Thank you.
Cheers, Eddie. God bless. That's the great Eddie Jordan, founder and owner of Jordan Grand Prix, and as he's just said, fan of the Rolling Stones. So if anybody's got any influence, let's get him to Berlin as well. We'll have a cracking time. Cheers, Eddie. Enjoy. Right. I hope you enjoyed that, because I think what I felt, if you're an F1 fan like me, you will have enjoyed it, even if you're not. Some profound thoughts there about leadership, quality, competition, and being British, how we get things right. Pause. Segue. Time now, I'm delighted also to say, for our Rural Spotlight, where we highlight the issues that matter most to our rural communities, who, of course, exist to serve you and me. Yesterday, when we were talking about Ukraine, the issue of fertilisers came up again. Ukraine's a huge producer, and obviously the war has disrupted the supply chain. For farmers here in the UK, that is potentially fatal. Adding to their woes is the labour shortage that we mentioned in our first discussion today on the cost of living crisis, and that means real problems for labour-intensive sectors, not least like fruit picking. So, I'm delighted to welcome back onto the programme a good friend of mine, Mark Tufnell, who is the president of the Country Land and Business Association. Mark, great to see you. It's in the papers again today. I can't remember which one, it doesn't matter. But if I look here quickly, it might say it's page 24 of the Mail, saying that the price of tomatoes are about to rocket because of the cost of fertilising them to make them glow beautiful red, but also just getting people rolling up their sleeves picking those tomatoes. This is a real cost of living crisis.
You're absolutely right, Alistair. It is a cost of living crisis. We've seen fertiliser prices nearly treble. We've seen increases in fuel costs, gas, electricity, and obviously there are rising labour costs as well. And these are costs that the producer and the farmer are having to bear, at the same time as trying to pass that price on through the retailer to the customer. And it is a real challenge, particularly in fruit and veg, where we're not nearly as self-sufficient as we would like to be as a country.
While you were speaking there at the end, and if people are watching our conversation on television, there are potatoes going through. Just before that, there was a guy with a small machine picking, I don't know, broccoli or cabbage, something like that. I mean, the notion of labour intensity is real, and I just want to remind folk at home that you're not just a chap in a very nice smart blue shirt who talks about these matters professionally as a spokesperson. You're an arable farmer in the Cotswolds. Is it really proving increasingly difficult for you and your family to hold this thing together?
The real difficulty, Alistair, is over cash flow, because it's increased by a factor of 3. We have to pay for our fertiliser in July/August. I won't be paid for my crop until the following November. So whilst the crop of wheat that I'm going to harvest will have doubled in price and I can sell it forward, and I will make a profit on that, I have to carry that extra cash cost through that period. Now, we're very fortunate in an arable system in that it's very mechanised, so I'm able to control my costs. I don't have to go out and get seasonal workers. But with the fruit and the potato side of things that you've looked at, particularly the fruit, we need the seasonal workers. And although the government has increased the scheme from 30,000 people to 40,000 workers, we still estimate they'll need a total of 75,000. So there's a huge mismatch in the number of people that's needed. And that's really why there are these pressures within the sector itself.
We've talked many times on this programme about labour shortages and the difficulties and the weirdness that although there's over 1 million vacancies out there, we are pretty well at maximum employment at the moment. Is the basic problem, and I'm going to be quite blunt about it, a lack of willingness on the part of people, as it were, to roll up their sleeves and do what can be back-breaking work, or is the hard truth that they can earn more elsewhere for less physical effort?
I think when you look at the berry market and the labour rates that are paid, the base rate is £10.10, and a really specialist picker could earn up to £20 an hour. So you have to compare those rates of pay to the rates of pay that other people are being offered in other sectors, for example, working in a supermarket. But of course, the conditions are totally different. They're out in a field, they're not in a factory or in a supermarket. And you need to have speed to pick at the required rates to get those high rates of pay. And it seems that it's the workers from Bulgaria, Romania, the Philippines, Indonesia, who are prepared to come over and do that work, learn how to do it, and they get paid significantly more than they would be paid in their own country. And I suppose that's the real challenge, is that workers in this country are paid, on the whole, a pretty good wage.
Yeah.
We have a basic minimum working wage, and I guess our workers aren't prepared to do it.
Yeah. We'll leave that on the table for folk to reflect upon, but it's a pretty profound truth. Final point is that we were chatting about the fact that we had the pleasure of talking to you again about this particular subject, and I mentioned the tomatoes piece that I'd read in the Mail, and my producer, Laurie, said, well, she comes from South Wales, and she said, there's a new thing developing there, and it's a little bit like, you remember the days when pick your own strawberries was really a big deal, because it meant you got beautiful fruit quite cheap, but also it was a lovely day out typically for the family. And she was saying, but it's now beginning in the vegetable sector as well. People will do the same. They'll get what they need slightly cheaper, and hey, the family has a good day out. Are you seeing that pick up?
Well, I'm not seeing it pick up just yet, but I, like you, remember it from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I used to go and pick strawberries not far from here, and I'm in the Cotswolds. But I do think that there'll be times, particularly in the vegetable areas where they're growing cauliflowers and broccoli, farmers may well take small parts of their farm and allocate those over to pick your own and allow people to come and take what they need and actually reduce their overall labour cost.
Well, I hope so, because it helps people try and live within their budgets and keep the cost of living down. But it is, I remember very clearly myself, a lovely day out. Mark, it is always a genuine pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this Sunday afternoon. Mark Tufnell, President of the Country Land and Business Association. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've lots more still to come on the programme as we inch up towards 1 o'clock. A whole hour after that, we'll be discussing mortgages. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will see a mix of sunshine and showers, heaviest and most frequent in the east. Let's take a look at the details. There'll be increasing amounts of blue sky across southwest England this afternoon. A few lingering showers, but most places staying dry, highs reaching around 20 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. A few of the showers could be on the heavy side as well. Plenty of sunny spells across Wales this afternoon. There'll be a few showers, but not as heavy compared to recent days. Highs of around 20 Celsius. Showers continue to fade away across northwest England this afternoon. There'll be increasing amounts of sunshine as a result, feeling pleasant for all with light winds and highs of 18 Celsius. North East England will remain fairly unsettled with a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some could be heavy at times, highs of 19 Celsius with light winds for all. Sunny spells and scattered showers across much of Scotland this afternoon. Some of the showers may be heavy, but many places will avoid these. Temperatures reaching around 18 Celsius. Largely dry across Northern Ireland. A few showers are possible, most likely in the east. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs reaching 18 Celsius. Breezy along some northern coasts. So showers will fade away for many as we move through to the evening, staying breezy and unsettled though across northern Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome. If you've just joined us, the time is 30 seconds past 1 o'clock. Hello and welcome back if you've been with us since 12 o'clock, and thank you very much indeed. I'm Alastair Stewart and we're here for a final hour of our programme, and I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with top-class guests, and we've plenty more still to come, including more on our top discussion about public spending, taxes, the cost of living crisis, your ideas plus my guests' ideas. Also, this hour we'll be talking mortgages and the idea of having a lifelong mortgage and beyond, so that if you're lucky enough to have a home, you don't just leave it to your kids, but you leave the mortgage to them as well. Now, there's a thought. We'll be trawling over all of that. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the latest news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 1 minute past 1. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Several new allegations of inappropriate behaviour have been made against former Conservative MP Chris Pincher. 6 claims have emerged just days after he resigned as Deputy Whip and was suspended from the party after allegedly groping 2 men. The latest allegations, which stretch back more than a decade, were reported in several newspapers this morning, claiming he made unwanted advances to male MPs. No official complaints were ever made, and he's denied the allegations to newspapers. Mr. Pincher says he's currently seeking professional medical support, but insists he will remain as an MP. The government wants security checks on new airport workers to be treated as a priority to prevent travel delays this summer. The Department of Transport claims counter-terrorist checks are being processed in record times as shortages of baggage and security staff fuel hold-ups. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says people have made huge sacrifices during the pandemic and deserve their flights to run on time. Travel expert Simon Calder told GB News there are still serious delays.
And there's a huge blame game going on with the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps saying to the airlines, you spent 2 years saying all you want to do is fly people around and to the airports as well. You just want people to be able to travel as soon as they can. It all falls apart. But they say, look, actually, we suffered the most serious travel restrictions of any European country.
The British Medical Association is criticising government plans to halt sick pay for NHS workers who test positive for COVID. The decision, which comes into effect on July 7th, means staff can no longer take special leave to self-isolate. The BMA is warning the move will mean many will be working despite being symptomatic with the virus. The Department of Health and Social Care says NHS staff have generous support with up to 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay, depending on length of service. The government's spending watchdog plans to investigate the Prime Minister's 2019 election pledge to build 40 new hospitals by the end of the decade. It's after the Shadow Health Secretary warned the plans were a waste of taxpayers' money, with many hospitals having alterations or refurbishments instead of being new. Wes Streeting has also criticised delays, with NHS trusts still waiting for funds to be allocated. Russia claims it's taken control of a key city in the east of Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry says they now control all of the Luhansk region after capturing the last major city, Lysychansk. Ukraine still hasn't responded to those claims. It comes as Moscow say at least 3 people have been killed and 4 injured in the Russian city of Belgorod near the Ukraine border. However, this has also not yet been independently verified. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Russia's attack continues to focus on the Donbas region.
There is a sense of relaxation in many rear cities now, but the war is not over. It is there. Unfortunately, its brutality sometimes only grows, and we must not forget about it. Brutal hostilities continue along the entire front line, in Donbass, the epicenter, of course, in the cities of Luhansk region. Hostile activity is intensifying in the Kharkiv region.
Thousands of Australians have been ordered to evacuate parts of Sydney after torrential rain brought intense flooding. Vehicles have been left marooned and sports fields turned into lakes, with the Met Office warning the downpour will intensify over the next 2 days. Steph Cook, Minister for Emergency Services and Resilience, is warning the public not to be complacent.
The Hawkesbury and Nepean rivers will rise higher than what we experienced in March 2021, March 2022 and April of 2022. If you were safe in 2021, do not assume you will be safe tonight. This is a rapidly evolving situation, and we could very well see areas impacted that have never experienced flooding before.
And Wimbledon will have tennis on the middle Sunday of the tournament for the first time in its history. British players Heather Watson and Cameron Norrie will both be in action, making their debuts in the last 16. That's coming right up. And the centenary of Centre Court is also being celebrated at the All England Club, with previous winners making an appearance alongside refugees from Ukraine, Syria and Afghanistan. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. According to YouGov's regular polling, we, all of us, you, me and everyone we know, are more concerned about the economy and the cost of living crisis than anything else, including health. But what solutions are there to assuage our fears? The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak's energy bill discounts only due to come into force from October. It's believed that there is a very lively debate between number 10 and number 11 Downing Street about cutting taxes right now. specifically VAT. Prime Minister Boris Johnson apparently wants to cut it, yet the Chancellor and his team at the Treasury seem to be more wary. But a cut in VAT would add to borrowing unless cuts are made in other areas of public spending. So what can or what should the government do? First of all, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk with any comments you may have had on our existing conversations and after you've listened to the ones that are about to come up, or indeed any of the other stories that we're covering today. We are also on Twitter and we are on Facebook. I'm delighted now to be joined by Conservative Member of Parliament for Thirsk and Moulton. And with all due respect to him and the good people of Thirsk and Moulton, more importantly in this context, he is a member of the Treasury Select Committee, Kevin Hollinrake. Kevin, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The Treasury Select Committee, I've got a thing about select committees. I think they're amongst the most important institutions in our democracy. You keep an eye on what the Treasury are up to. And what worries me most about this conversation, and we've talked to Julian Jessup, former Treasury man, Nigel Nelson from the Mirror is in here with me, and across the spectrum, including the Taxpayers Alliance, the consensus is it's a no-win for the Treasury. Cut taxes without spending cuts, things get worse. Don't help folk, and your party gets hammered even more. How do you finesse it?
Well, Alistair, I agree with you entirely. Select committees are really important. They're definitely the most constructive thing I've been involved with since I entered Parliament 7 years ago. We take a very independent look at what the Treasury is doing. I think the government's got to be very careful. There's only a certain amount of money you can spend. The number one thing we've got to try and do is get inflation under control. That's actually a responsibility of the Bank of England. We Gordon Brown actually some time ago gave the Bank of England independence. It needs, unfortunately, to increase interest rates and reduce the amount of quantitative easing, which is the printing of digital money that's put into the economy to try and slow the economy down or slow the growth in prices in the economy down. That's the number one thing. In the meantime, the government's put quite a lot of money in, £37 billion of support in to help households. And for the lowest income households, that almost completely offsets the cost of the increase in energy prices. So that has definitely helped to a great degree. But the more it does, the more it'll fuel inflation, of course. That's the difficulty. It's a very difficult balancing act to strike.
Sure, I understand that.
The Chancellor's doing a good job.
No, I absolutely understand that. I wanted to hear the whole argument, and I did clearly, but I do want to pick up one point. You just said that you think that spring statement package from Rishi, which he and the Prime Minister detail bit by bit by bit in the Sun newspaper today in 2 pages, you said that should pretty well cover the increase in energy costs. Are you sure about that?
Right. Yes, it's the lowest income households, yes, about £1,200
but
for the lowest income households.
But for the bulk of us, it doesn't come anywhere near that.
Well, there's only 2 ways you can offset the cost of the increase in living costs, and that is either the people who are suffering those living costs, you and me, Alistair, and other households around the country pay more or less of our monthly budgets, or the taxpayer pays, and that's the same cohort of people, of course, in many cases. Yeah. So where are you going to get the money from? There's only so much the Treasury can do. Yeah. And so I think we've got to tread very carefully. And the more it does, of course, the more it fuels inflation. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there is only a limited room for manoeuvre. I think what the Chancellor sought to do is to mitigate the increasing the cost of living for the lowest income households. That's the most sensible way of doing it. That's what I saw all the economists were calling for before the Chancellor acted. So I think what he's done is pretty sensible and strikes the right balance.
That's the second time, Kevin, that you've said there's only a certain amount of money that the government can spend. You said that earlier on when the conversation started. I'm not trying to be silly or tricky here because you speak eloquently for the good people of Thirsk and Moulton, and you are a member of the Treasury Select Committee. But am I right to draw the conclusion that you, as a Conservative Member of Parliament who also happens to be on the Treasury Select Committee, is slightly more with the cautious Chancellor and Treasury team than the perhaps less cautious and more generous Prime Ministerial team?
Well, you're speculating on things I don't know about, Alistair. I speak to the Prime Minister about this stuff, and you say he's calling for more support. He may be. I think that what the government has to do is look at this stuff as it evolves. It may be a situation where the cost of living crisis gets worse. I hope it doesn't. I think there's a good chance that inflation will drop out pretty quickly, and that's certainly what most economists seem to think will happen. But I mean, we just can't keep on spending. I mean, the opposition has promised £100 billion of extra spending without saying where it's going to come from, or only to a limited degree it has. So I say it's taxpayers' money. The government doesn't have any money. It's taxpayers' money. It's got to be paid back. We're already £2.36 trillion in debt. If you throw more money at it, that debt will simply increase, and the cost of servicing the debt will actually grow and grow and grow. So it's a very difficult situation. And these are international pressures, of course. The vast majority of inflation, the rise in the cost of living, are global pressures. So there's only a certain amount you can do about it in any shape or form. So it is pretty tricky.
Yeah. Kevin, stay exactly where you are. I'll come straight back to you, but the next voice that you will hear after mine is Nigel Nelson, who's been sitting here patiently listening to our conversation. Incredibly eloquent backbencher there who's on the Treasury Select Committee. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but nearly 4. There is a limit to what the government can spend. Hopefully, the worst will fall out through the natural economic cycle.
Well, we hope it will. But, I mean, I'm not sure I'm quite as optimistic as Kevin is about that actually happening. Now, Kevin talks about the
worst pressures falling out because economic cycles run for a period of time.
Yes, that's right. And then the idea that we're going to come out of it by the end of the year, I just don't think is hugely likely. I mean, the point I would just sort of pick Kevin up on, he talks about raising interest rates to try and control inflation. Of course, that's a standard way of doing it. You take money out of the economy, you encourage people to save rather than spend. However, that also puts mortgages up. So the result is that the cost of living crisis then hits your ordinary people once again. So it is a bit of a catch-22. There's no magic bullet for something like this, but I'm not sure that is necessarily the answer that we're looking for. It's part of the answer, but not the full thing.
Kevin, coming back to you, and I hope you heard what Nigel was just saying there. I remember, and actually talked to Ed Bulls in some detail about it at the time of that big decision to say the Bank of England the government will set an inflation target, but the Bank of England polices it. And all sorts of people, I think yourself included, have said, well, they've taken their eye a little bit off the ball. The other lively debate at the time was that the Bank of England, in step with the Treasury, should also have a target for economic growth. The Bank of England should be helping with growth as well. You're a former businessman. You were an estate agent involved in employing people and making money before you came into politics. Isn't that the way forward as well? Growth is the answer to everything.
Well, I agree with that. We've got to have a more productive economy, a more prosperous economy. And I think that's the government's job rather than the Bank of England, principally. The Bank of England has one job, really, is to keep inflation under control. And I agree. I think it took its eye off the ball latter part of last year on that and didn't really take account of the specific pressures the UK will experience due to things like Brexit, for example, because labour shortages are more profound in the UK than elsewhere. So just to correct Nigel on one thing, I didn't say inflation would drop out of the system this year, not at all. I think the economic forecasters we've spoken to are talking 2 to 3 years, but most have said it should come back to 2 to 3% within 2 to 3 years. That's where I expect it to be. In terms of other measures we can utilise, I'm happy to listen to ideas from Nigel or anybody else in how we can mitigate the costs of living pressures. But in the short term, that's very, very difficult. Yes, he's absolutely right. As you increase interest rates, it puts household pressures household budgets under pressure. But that's that's part of the whole equation, is you slow down consumer spending, which should start to mitigate some of the domestic pressures on inflation.
Next voice you will hear will be, again, Nigel answering your question. You began our conversation at 12 o'clock with one or two of your own ideas. Share them with Kevin.
Well, I mean, the obvious way to deal with the cost of living crisis is below inflationary wages rises. That is the most effective way of doing it. And it's no good the government trying to restrict that to 2 and 3%. That just does not cut it. I don't want to see above inflationary rises, because that will make it worse. I think also we have to actually look at the world of work. That's another bigger subject. And also we've got a very grumpy workforce at the moment, understandably so. Let's cheer them up a bit.
Yeah. Kevin, do you think on that, I know what you will say a bit about inflationary pressures, because you've already been very, very clear about that. But even a cost of living pay rise right now would have to be in the region of 7, maybe even 8%. But it puts money back in people's pockets. They can earn a wee bit more before they have to pay any national insurance, and that is a great thing. I repeat my point. If we stimulate the economy, if we get growth going, then lo and behold, borrowing comes down, public spending on things like benefits comes down a wee bit. That's the magic wand, is it not?
Well, yes, definitely. That growth in the economy, that more productive economy, we all want to see. Absolutely right. And I think the whole levelling up thing, from the north and for the north, totally believe in that. And but that's a very long-term problem. I mean, the economic disparity between the northeast and the London and the southeast is as wide as it was between East and West Germany prior to reunification. That took 3 decades to solve that problem. Those are long-term issues. The short-term issues are much more difficult. I think we do need to see pay restraint. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but nevertheless, because I know household budgets are under pressure. But if inflation sets in, if wage increases are at inflationary levels, then inflation will set in more permanently. That's very damaging for the economy, very damaging for jobs, and the devastation on those households will be much worse if we go down that route. These should be short-term pressures. The Chancellor stepped in with some short-term mitigations, some solutions to some household problems. I think we've just got to grin and bear it and get through these next 12, 18 months till we see the peak. Inflation should have peaked by then and should then be coming down back to the other side of the graph.
Final question to you, Kevin, if I may, and I want you to metaphorically take your Treasury Select Committee hat off and put it there, and I'm talking to you directly as a leading backbencher, a member of the Conservative Party who represents the good people of Thirsk and Moulton. Great Prime Ministers can tell their Chancellors what to do when they're riding on the crest of a wave, whether it's Tony Blair or Margaret Thatcher versus Gordon Brown or Nigel Nelson. This Prime Minister, whether you think he's innocent or guilty of things like Partygate, of things like handling the Chris Pincher case, a whole range of issues on that charge sheet, his authority is damaged, and that makes it very difficult for your party, does it not?
Well, I think it's been a difficult time, there's no doubt about it. But I think we had the vote of confidence. He won that vote of confidence. He gets 12 months to put things right. And I think the next 12 months are absolutely critical. Do I think the Prime Minister can get back on top, win back the confidence of the party? Yes, I do. But it's tough, a tough time. But there are no easy solutions to these problems. We've just got to stay focused, do the right thing, and build back a reputation for calm competence. That's what we need to do.
What would your message be to those fellow backbench Tories who seem to be trying to find any which way to not have to wait another year to test his popularity within the parliamentary party, but find another route to test him again?
Well, I said, together we stand, divided we fall. I think it doesn't serve anybody's purpose other than, may I say, Alistair, you're always very fair in your questioning, but it serves the media's purpose and it serves the opposition's purpose if we're divided. So I would say get behind the Prime Minister. Let's see what we can do over the next 12 months.
And you know perfectly well, Kevin, that I've written that myself, and I agree that there are some within the media who perhaps should reread the rules on impartiality and balance. It's a pleasure having you on the programme. You're always welcome, and thank you for playing both roles. Good, solid backbench Tory MP and a member of the Treasury Select Committee. Keep in touch, Kevin, and love to talk to you again soon. Thank you very much indeed. Very quick one on that last point. I mean, forget about public borrowing and the rest of it. Reading the Riot Act to his colleagues.
Well, he can do, but there are still 2 in 5 MPs who are against Boris Johnson. Yeah. Had they organised themselves properly and the vote had been taken after the Tiverton by-election, I'm not sure Boris Johnson would still be here.
But his message, united we stand, divided we fall.
The argument from the other side would be they would unite under a new leader.
Yeah. OK. Thank you very much indeed for joining in that conversation and also for your contributions right at the top. Really, really helpful. And again, my thanks to Kevin Hollinrake there. So there was a lot there on the economy. There was a lot there on cost of living, tax, public spending, everything that we're talking about. It's 21 minutes past 1. So if I behave myself, we'll still have some time at the end of the programme to hear your views. And I'm very happy to hear from you on what you think Kevin just said about the Prime Minister and about what Nigel just said about the Prime Minister as well. That and plenty more still to come this afternoon in the remaining 40 minutes of Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've heard of hand-me-downs in clothes, but hand-me-downs in mortgages? I'll be finding out more after the break, but first let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will see a mix of sunshine and showers, heaviest and most frequent in the east. Let's take a look at the details. There'll be increasing amounts of blue sky across southwest England this afternoon. A few lingering showers, but most places staying dry, highs reaching around 20 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. A few of the showers could be on the heavy side as well. Plenty of sunny spells across Wales this afternoon. There'll be a few showers, but not as heavy compared to recent days. Highs of around 20 Celsius. Showers continue to fade away across northwest England this afternoon. There'll be increasing amounts of sunshine as a result, feeling pleasant for all with light winds and highs of 18 Celsius. Northeast England will remain fairly unsettled with a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some could be heavy at times, highs of 19 Celsius with light winds for all. Sunny spells and scattered showers across much of Scotland this afternoon. Some of the showers may be heavy, but many places will avoid these. Temperatures reaching around 18 Celsius. Largely dry across Northern Ireland. A few showers are possible, most likely in the east. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs reaching 18 Celsius, breezy along some northern coasts. So showers will fade away for many as we move through to the evening, staying breezy and unsettled though across northern Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It is 25 minutes past 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, and I quote, "One day all this might be your great-grandsons." I think it says, oh, great, yes, it is great-grandsons. It's a lovely, brilliant cartoon in the Sunday Telegraph. But it stems from what seems to be almost a throwaway line from the Prime Minister, that he wants the mortgage industry to look at full life mortgages and even the chance for people to pass on their mortgages to their offspring. Ultra-long 50-year home loans could be an attempt by the government to tackle the housing crisis, which my previous guests have been talking about as well, as a key bit of the cost of living crisis. It would allow more people to build up equity rather than pay rent. Under the potential plan being examined by the government following the Prime Minister's comments, a longer mortgage period would allow people to borrow larger amounts with the possibility to pass debt on to their children. Now, if you think it's nutty, the Japanese have been doing it for years. So, would it work here? Delighted to be joined now to discuss it further by property expert and author of The Truth About Property, Henry Davis. And there Henry is. Do you think it could work here?
Hi, Alistair. I think in principle it's not a bad idea because, the government is intentioned. But the fundamental problem with this idea is that all this is going to do is increase demand. And anything that increases demand is going to be a problem. And that's a fundamental issue with this policy. There would have been loads of better options which would actually increase supply. And I have 4 or 5 ideas that I know could actually solve the property market. It could take 20-minute conversation with the government and we could solve the whole thing overnight. The fundamental issue is there is no supply.
Sure. I'm going to ask you to list them in just one moment, but I want you to answer this question first, just by way of clarification. When you say about the supply issue, it's because people like me, for example, who might consider downsizing now the kids have all left home, and that then puts our home into the market, adds to supply. Instead, we can say, well, I can hang on to it because the kids will then inherit both the house and the mortgage. Is that the supply point you're making?
I think it's more the fact that, no, what I'm saying, Alistair, is that if you make mortgages easy, right, it creates more demand. All it does is gives more inflation. So prices will go, if you make it easier to get a mortgage, it just simply means prices go up.
Yeah,
and what the government are not doing is tackling the reasons why we have high prices.
Yeah, OK. Let's assume that Michael Gove, who is the member of the cabinet responsible for this territory, is now listening to you rather than our lovely GBNews audiences on television and radio, and indeed me. Your 4 points. Bang, 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 bang. Off you go.
OK, Michael Gove. Number 1 is land banking. Stop land banking by the major developers, which basically means they have to build on the land within a certain period of getting the permission, for example, or even owning the land. Number 2, dump section 106. This is basically a tax that developers have to pay and it makes sites unviable. Number 3, this is the most important one. We need to embrace high-rise development, but quality high-rise development like you see in Dubai, with big apartments that feel like homes. Next one, planning departments. We need planning departments that ask the question, how can we make this work? Because I deal with planning departments every day of my life, and it's an absolute nightmare. The last one, I know it's more than 4, OK, Michael Gove, if you're listening, is that we need minimum occupancy sizes where, one person can't live in a house of 3,000 square foot. And there is one more that I forgot to add. This is a bonus one. And this goes against my own business model, and this is not good for me to tell this, OK? But we need to ban Airbnb and short-term lets. Because a lot of those houses are being used up effectively. And I'm actually in this business, and it doesn't suit me to tell this story.
Sure. No, and I asked 4, you said 4, you gave us 6. That's great. They are on record. We'll run the clip again after our conversation has finished. But on things like land banking and also on planning, Gove, it strikes me, has got his teeth into that with the legislation that he and his department are pushing forward. I mean, there are many Tory friends of mine who say Michael Gove is the first Secretary of State in this territory that is actually on the side of the angels.
He's on the side of renters, and he is trying, but the law of unintended consequences is playing in, and Michael Gove is not being advised as to how his policies are affecting the system on the longer term. So at the moment, what he's doing with his current renters reform bill, what this bill is doing is basically stopping landlords from buying properties to rent out. So that's the bottom line. All his policies are simply restricting supply. And it means higher prices for renters. And many of the government policies, although well-intentioned, they're not thinking about the longer term, how this is going to play out on a practical level, because they're not getting advised by people like me.
Well, the invitation is clear, and you've got an agenda for that conversation. I hope it's taken up, and I wish you well. For the time being, Henry Davis, thank you very much for finding time for us, and hopefully through us, Michael Gove as well. Great to talk to you. Henry Davis there, the author of The Truth About Property. And with that little list of his, I suspect the author of another book that may just come along fairly soon on his plans. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and with about half an hour to go, we've still got more to come this afternoon, including going back to our main discussion of the day and hearing from someone who's previously been very outspoken with his views on the matter. You won't want to miss Sir John Redwood. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news headlines. Here's Ray.
Thanks, Alistair. Just after 1:31, here's the latest news. 6 new allegations of inappropriate behaviour have been made against former Conservative MP Chris Pincher. The fresh claims have emerged just days after he resigned as Deputy Whip and was suspended from the party after allegedly groping 2 men. The latest allegations, which stretch back more than a decade, were reported in several newspapers this morning, claiming he made unwanted advances to male MPs. No official complaints were ever made, and he's denied the allegations to newspapers. Russia claims it has taken control of a key city in the east of Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry says they now control all of the Luhansk region after capturing the last major city, Lysychansk. Ukraine hasn't yet responded to the claims. It comes as Moscow say at least 3 people have been killed and 4 injured in the Russian city of Belgorod near the Ukraine border. However, this has also not yet been independently verified. More than 80 firefighters are tackling a blaze at a block of flats in South London. A dozen fire engines are at the scene of the 70-storey building in Bromley. Half of a 5-room flat on the 15th floor of the block is alight, and also part of the roof. The cause of the fire is not yet known. Wimbledon will have tennis on the middle Sunday of the tournament for the first time in its history. British players Heather Watson and Cameron Norrie will both be in action, making their debuts in the last 16. The centenary of Centre Court is also being celebrated at the All England Club, with previous winners making a special appearance. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now back to Alastair Stewart and Friends, just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
we're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 25 minutes to 2. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. We've been speaking about tax cuts and public spending in depth today. It's believed that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Chancellor Rishi Sunak have differing opinions on cutting VAT. PM apparently wants to cut it. Sunak is said to be slightly more cautious. But a cut in VAT would add to borrowing unless cuts are made in other areas of public spending. That has been articulated quite brilliantly in the past by my next guest, and I'm delighted now to be joined live by Sir John Redwood, former Cabinet Minister and Conservative Member of Parliament for Wokingham. John, very good to see you. The Sun article today that Boris and Rishi have written together, do you think that that is slightly cautious, a slightly missed opportunity? Should they both have gone further along your lines?
Well, yes, of course. I think the Treasury and the Office of Budget Responsibility have been making extremely foolish forecasts for 3 or 4 years. They've been giving very bad advice to the Chancellor, and I think the Chancellor must stand up to them and say, this isn't good enough. As a result of following your forecast and advice, we've ended up with very high inflation, and we may well have a recession on the way if we don't take further action. So I think the essential thing to do immediately is to take VAT down or off energy, motor fuel at the pumps and domestic fuel, because that would both start to cut the inflation rate and it would give a bit more money back to people just at the point where the economy is slowing to zero.
Yeah. You and I have known each other for a long time, and you have always been a tax cutter, almost philosophically, as it were, because you wanted to boost the economy and enhance the attractiveness of the work ethic. I've never heard you articulate over all of those years the idea of cutting taxes to cushion a cost of living crisis. That's different, isn't it, John?
Well, because we haven't had one on this scale before in the last couple of decades or so. We're going back to the 70s when I was very young to see these twin evils of slowdown, maybe going into recession, and very high inflation. I was warning last year that they shouldn't carry on printing money, and that was, of course, a joint decision of the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Bank of England, and I think we are paying a price for that. And then the inflation, which was well set in January of this year, was supercharged by the awful Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impact that had on energy and grain prices. But if you look back to the March 2021 budget and Treasury OBR forecasts, they said that all the way out to 2025, inflation would stay below 2% a year. And they said that every year out to 2025, the economy would grow by 1.6% a year or more. You know, how wrong can you be? And when you are that wrong, you need to change your views and your policy.
Yeah. One thing I sense from reading your commentary, and I noticed that there are folks like Craig McKinley and Damien Green who are with you on the idea of reducing VAT, especially on fuel. You haven't changed a jot, however, in your belief that if you cut a tax, whichever one it might be, then there has to be a reduction in public spending as well.
No, I've never said that. It's not automatic. What I have been saying this time round is you need to give some money back because the government and the oil market is taking too much money out of people's family budgets. And I'm also making a case I've regularly made, which is if you cut certain tax rates, you don't need to cut public spending because you actually get more revenue, not less.
Yeah.
The danger with the Treasury approach at the moment is with this very big increase in taxes across the piece, new taxes, higher rates on old taxes, they could end up with less revenue because if you slow the economy too much, you collect less in receipts because there's less turnover and activity.
I accept and appreciate that correction on my analysis of the Redwood analysis, but I hope I've got this one right. With improved productivity, you can make tax cuts, but without improved productivity, it's much the same as wage rises. That itself will fuel inflation.
Yes, you shouldn't have inflationary public spending. That's always been an obvious mantra, not just of mine, but of anyone who's sensible about economics. What I want is a better paid public sector because people are working smarter and better. So you put in investment in computers, artificial intelligence, machinery to help them. You work away at better process and better ways of doing things in the way the private sector does. Because we've had a big disappointment for 20-odd years in public sector productivity. And there are a number of obvious ways which you can pick up from the private sector, which would mean people could work smarter and better, not harder, but smarter and better, and you can then pay them more. I mean, the railways are a classic example, and it's very important the management of the railways stand out for higher pay, justified by much improved working practices, because the technology available to the railway greatly outstrips current practice, and we need to get value for that investment and that technology, and then you can have a better paid workforce.
A couple of points finally, which are slightly more overtly political, but which I know you won't mind. That Julian Jessup, who used to work in the Treasury, was saying that there is issue not only of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but a top team of people surrounding him from his position, and that, of course, the Prime Minister is First Lord of the Treasury. And as with Thatcher and Lawson and Blair and Brown, a powerful Prime Minister can put his or her foot down and demand what they want and get what they want. This Prime Minister is damaged, whether it's Partygate or whether it's the most recent things with Chris Pincher and the rest of it. Is that a core problem? It's got nothing to do with economic policy. It's purely politics, that this Prime Minister cannot demand and get what, in his heart of hearts, he wants.
Well, I would rephrase it. I would say that this Prime Minister is very collegiate and tries to carry difficult colleagues with him. And I do think, to save all of us, to save the economy, and to get inflation down, he does need to say to his Chancellor in private, you're getting very bad advice from the Treasury, which you're repeating to me. We're going to do something different. Together, we are going to conquer both inflation and recession, and this is how we do it.
The final point, when I mentioned on my social media that you were coming on board for a conversation today, there were half a dozen people or so who said the real answer is to put Redwood in the Treasury. He's our man. We go along with what he has to say. What would be your number one key thing were that to happen and you took pen to paper for your autumn statement to be delivered, your budget to be delivered come October? What would your number one thing be, John?
Well, I offer free advice because I think it would be good for the nation and for my party, and I'm not expecting any particular duties or reward. But if I had to offer the draft statement to Chancellor Sunak, I would say make it before we break for the summer and start it off by taking 10% of the 20% of VAT off motor fuels, by cancelling the 5% VAT on domestic fuel, and then announcing that you're not going to go ahead with the special excess profit taxes and the corporation tax rises on business, because we're going to need all the business and investment support we can get to see off recession next year.
John Redwood, it is always a pleasure, and I apologise that we kept you waiting a little bit. That was a problem at our end, not at yours. My apologies for that. But for your contribution to our debate, huge thanks. Always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. Very candid advice there, then, from Sir John Redwood. Not least, bring that October statement forward. There's a measure of just how difficult things are for ordinary folk out there, not only in John's Wokingham constituency, but up and down the country. Let's stick with a similar theme, but move on from the picture of the cost of living crisis at a kind of big strategic level and talk about what we're calling summer savings. How can we still enjoy our summer break without reaching too deep into our pockets? My favourite person for answering such questions is the founder of moneymagpie.com, and it's my lovely friend Jasmine Birtles, and there she is. Jasmine's also a regular Daily Mail columnist now, and you should seek her out. Very sage advice, not on microeconomics, but actually how you and I can save a little bit of money. What's it looking like there as we drift into this very beginning part of July? The kids are home from school, the weather is fantastic. How can we make our pounds go further?
Yes, absolutely. And it is families that really are looking at how on earth can they save money when, as you say, the kids are home. This is a particularly tough time for families, especially single parent families, and they're looking for ways. Thankfully, as you say, at the moment, the weather's fantastic. If the weather holds out, we're all fine, frankly, because you can take the kids out to the park, you can take them to the beach. You know, there's lots of lovely cheap food now in the supermarkets. I know a few supermarkets have got special deals. As so, for example, they've got sort of Just Essentials. You've got, you know, all the other supermarkets. They've got their cheaper ranges. You can do picnics. You can go out with a bat and ball, and that is your day sorted.
Yeah, and also I really want to underline something that you've said, and I remember it from my own childhood, how we miss so much in this country by scraping together a few bob to go to the south of France or go to the south of Spain. Go to Cornwall, go to East Anglia. My eldest son and his girlfriend have just come back from East Anglia and had the most fabulous time.
Yes, there really is so much, as you say, there's so much in our country. I mean, as long as you can afford the petrol to get there, you know, that's an issue. And of course, trains have gone up as well. It's really not helpful at the moment. But, you know, one thing that I do it abroad, but you can do it within the country, is house swapping. I'm a big fan of house swapping. And, you know, there are various ways you can do it. There are house swap websites. Love Home Swap is one. House Swap is another one, .com, I think. And also, actually, you know, you could do it within Facebook, within, you know, some of these groups. And swapping, you know, as you say, Cornwall with Edinburgh or that kind of thing is
it's absolutely huge in America. I mean, the number of people who do it in America is phenomenal. So a Texan will go up to New England, and New Englander will go across to California. And it's an absolute doddle. The other thing my eldest son said is if you do go online, if you've got to go by train, because he prefers to do it that way than drive, if you are quite active on the internet, there are genuine deals to be had. If you book ahead, pay ahead, it can be a lot cheaper. The other thing that you mentioned the other day that I wanted to press you on, because again, it's happy childhood memories. You don't have to go to the pizzeria. You don't have to go to the takeaway Indian restaurant. You can have a picnic.
Yes, you really can. You can have a picnic, and nowadays there are all sorts of exciting things that you can get, you know, that you can make. There are some amazing recipes online, you know, picnic fun things. I remember, like you know, I remember going to the beach with my grandma and grandpa, and my grandma had her shopping trolley, and we had basically sandwiches and pink cake and white cake, you know, and bits and pieces. We totally loved it. We had the same thing every time. It didn't matter. We just loved it.
And viewers and listeners of a certain age, I go back to my grandparents who had a caravan and a thing that was called a primus stove, where you could boil up water and make a cup of tea in the lay-by. Just absolute joy. We've got a couple of minutes left, and you won't mind my switching the tone very, very slightly, because you know that we've been talking to lovely people like Julian Jessup from the Treasury, Kevin Hollenrake from the Treasury Select Committee, John Redwood just now. This is serious stuff. You know better than most that it ain't over yet, that we've got another rise in energy prices heading our way come October, although the Chancellor of the Exchequer's in the Sun newspaper this morning saying there'll be a little bit more in your back pocket at the end of July because of the national insurance situation and being able to earn a bit more before you pay national insurance. How worried are you?
I am concerned, and particularly because my readers are concerned. I do get emails from people who are very worried that the feeling is that they'll just about cope over the summer. You know, you don't have to use the heating, etc. But there's a sort of sense of a sword of Damocles hanging over us for the winter. And this is the worry, I think, that nobody knows how bad it's going to be. They just feel that it's going to be really bad. And I agree with John Redwood, and I've said this for a while, that lockdowns and the massive amount of money printing is very much to blame for much of this. Obviously, we've got the war as well. But, you know, this is something we seem to have created for ourselves, and it's the consumer who is suffering.
One of the other things, and this is my final point, that you've done in the paper, and we've talked about it on this programme as well, and it is a nod to America, because the coupons are huge in America. There are whole magazines that are produced just to do save a bob or two here on peas, bread, whatever it might be. We've got to lose our pride over that. If we're trying to make a budget work, there's nothing wrong with ripping out a thing from a newspaper, going to your shop and say, here's the potatoes I've just bought, and thank you very much indeed for the 10p off.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's a great one. And something that I use for online shopping is honey.com. And that's a sort of an automatic thing. It comes up at the top of the screen and it says, we found some discounts for this. They basically trawl the net for discounts. And that's a really, really helpful thing. Absolutely. That you can also join, you can sign up to discount voucher codes websites, and they'll send you far too many emails with voucher codes. But hey, you know, there's some good stuff in it.
So that's honey.com.
Yes, well, I think it's honey.com. It's certainly honey rewards or honey vouchers or something like that.
Okay.
Yes, honey.com. And you just put it in, it sort of automatically, it goes into Chrome or whatever is your browser, and it searches out, and it's really handy because it means you don't have to go and search them yourself.
As the old cliche goes, literally, every little helps, and why not? We're all shopping smarter and occasionally swallowing our pride and taking that voucher with us. It is always a total pleasure, Jasmine. Thank you very, very much indeed. Jasmine Birtles, the founder of moneymagpie.com. So honey.com, but also her own brilliant website, moneymagpie.com. Lots of ideas. You can stretch what is a limited amount of money just a little bit further. Now, we have been chatting about public spending today, and I'm delighted that we ended on a real practical hands-on solution as well, but lovely to hear her agreeing with the great Sir John Redwood. You've had a huge amount to say about it, so thank you very much indeed. Going to start with an old friend of mine, Rory McCallion, who's very often sitting over there on the sofa, and he makes this quite profound point. Rory writes, can we be confident that the current government will actually deliver on its promises? There is a big cut, yes, he says, in national insurance at the moment, which is great for working people on less than £37,000 a year, i.e. that's the majority, so hurrah for that. But corporate tax is due to rocket in the autumn, hitting small and medium-sized enterprises very heavily. My friend Robert Colvin writes brilliantly about that in The Times and online as well. Lorna says it's a flawed system. It's outsourced in order to make money from public funds. My company made £150 million in profit last year. That is public money being transferred into private hands for no gain. That could pay for a lot of social workers to help with caseloads. There's really brilliant lateral thinking there on public spending. Valentina joins the conversation, and I think I read this one out before the team had put it up there, but I'm going to repeat it because it's so good. This is Valentina's point. If people use the online salary calculator, they would find out that there isn't a crisis in the UK and no need to cut taxes. In my view, that's what she says. We are better off in the UK to bear the brunt of fuel prices. Just see the rest of Europe for comparison and the giveaway for fuel. And she's got a really good point if you look at economic growth rates across Europe and rates of inflation. So it's tough, but it may not be quite as tough as it is somewhere else. Vince says the cost of living crisis, the cost of living is rising at a high rate, which means the Treasury will be making more money from VAT returns. It seems, therefore, that the government has room to reduce the VAT rate and still reach their planned income. That will be music to the ears of my good friend Sir John Redwood. He believes that and has been saying it consistently for quite some time. So we'll print it out and send it to him as well, just in case he's gone off to take the dog for a walk or something. So that's it for today and indeed for this weekend. But don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News. All of the conversations I was lucky enough to have today, including the great Eddie Jordan from the British Grand Prix. I hope you've enjoyed it all, and thanks again for your contribution. But that is all that we have time for today. I'll be back next weekend from midday on Saturday and then again midday on Sunday, right up to 2. Hope you can join me then. Until then, have a terrific day. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK will see a mix of sunshine and showers, heaviest and most frequent in the east. Let's take a look at the details. There'll be increasing amounts of blue sky across southwest England this afternoon. A few lingering showers, but most places staying dry, highs reaching around 20 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. A few of the showers could be on the heavy side as well. Plenty of sunny spells across Wales this afternoon. There'll be a few showers, but not as heavy compared to recent days. Highs of around 20 Celsius. Showers continue to fade away across northwest England this afternoon. There'll be increasing amounts of sunshine as a result, feeling pleasant for all with light winds and highs of 18 Celsius. North East England will remain fairly unsettled with a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some could be heavy at times, highs of 19 Celsius with light winds for all. Sunny spells and scattered showers across much of Scotland this afternoon. Some of the showers may be heavy, but many places will avoid these. Temperatures reaching around 18 Celsius. Largely dry across Northern Ireland. A few showers are possible, most likely in the east. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs reaching 18 Celsius. Breezy along some northern coasts. So showers will fade away for many as we move through to the evening, staying breezy and unsettled though across northern Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon.